church and everything. But as soon as I was moving down, I just saw this one time, and she was like freezing cold. And I had like a jacket on the shirt, so I was wearing nothing. I knew if it took long, I would get very cold.
When I had to leave, I had to last month, February, I had to abandon a project.
You've only got 1 minute for this,
I temporarily leave a project that I was doing because my grandfather passed away. So yeah, I spent months on that. You spend months planning for February. Then on the 8th of February you get the call. So I live in Kenya. You get the call and then it's gonna go. Yeah. No regrets.
Okay, let's just sort of get a little sense of what you're saying. So, anyone able to give an example of having made a sacrifice for something and the sort of what made it possible or worth it, summing it up into something succinct? Anyone ever go on then, Alex? Yeah.
Just a little thing, but I can't even remember where I was going, but I was sat on a coach waiting to go somewhere, I can't remember. And then there was an announcement saying, oh, would anybody like to give up their seat because this person needs to get somewhere really quickly, it was an emergency and they haven't got a seat.
Ooh.
And so I just gave up my seat.
Oh, Alex. So why?
Because I realised that person needed to get somewhere.
Yeah.
He needed some help.
Why was it worth it to you though? Hard to put your finger on.
Yeah.
Let's leave that hanging.
Okay.
Okay, because that's part of the question, isn't it? Anyone else want to just...
This
Okay, that one.
Oh.
Is it Matty?
Yeah.
Yeah, Matty.
Oh, I would say, okay. About 2 years ago, I was walking down past Spike Island and I had like a coat with 3 layers on, and this guy approached me. He was freezing cold. It was like, I think -1 at a time. And he asked if I had like anything in like money, but I didn't have money. So I just gave him my like big puffer jacket.
Wow. And went
I've
cold.
got at home, and he doesn't have home to go to, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So again, what was driving that?
Well, I just saw that he was like shaking basically,
Yeah.
and
You couldn't bear it.
yeah, because I thought, what if I was in that position?
Yeah.
Like money's not going to really be able to get him a coat or anything,
Yeah.
and I didn't have any money anyway,
Yeah.
so yeah.
That's such a biblical thing to do. If they ask you for your coat, give them. Brilliant. One more.
Yeah, this one's probably a little different. Like I have done things for people, I guess, where I've got something out of it, but I think I went through a time in my life where I was just probably overly helping other people, like helping, sacrificing so much to my own detriment, to the point that it was actually damaging me.
Yeah.
So I don't know, so there's been a mixture of doing stuff for other people, I've got something, but there's also the helping people to the point of forgetting my own needs and then damaging myself.
Yeah, so that's all part of the picture. One more?
Yeah, I was being blocked, there was this project a month-long project that was scheduled that did happen in February. It just ended yesterday. I was leading it, planned it since, I'd say May last year. 8th of February, Granddad dies, had to kind of like leave. I just, not necessarily chucked it, but I just delegated it to someone else. Pretty much just chucked it, went back home. I then came back towards the end, so yeah, I had to leave that.
So you had to just put it down, sacrifice it really, and trust that it would be okay. And what did that feel like?
I did it for my mom. Like that was, like she needed me, and like jobs come and go. So
but it was probably a hard thing to do. So there's a kind of like a weighing up of all these different things that what is it about. So thanks for sharing. All that's really helpful, including the sort of counter side to it is really helpful. we're just going to think today about what place sacrifice has in our journey with God. And is it sort of right to think that we might be called to sacrifice things? You know, it's not very culturally popular. Jesus said, if you don't give up everything, you can't be my disciple. So Jesus, the example of sacrificial love, next one. If you do not give up everything, you cannot be my disciple. So we're going to actually look at some of the hardest teachings that Jesus ever gave. In fact, probably the hardest definition of what it is to be a disciple of Jesus. We're going to go there today. And he said things like this. Now, if you were a disciple in that time, you wouldn't have necessarily thought that was that big a deal, because their tradition was that their prophets and rabbis would have disciples. So example would be Elijah and Elisha. There might be a thing for that, a slide for that. So here's Elijah. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Elijah, great prophet. Everyone revered Elijah the prophet. He's choosing a successor called Elisha. And he did this thing where he went up to him and he threw his cloak over him, which meant, I want you to be my disciple in the ancient world, okay? Immediately it says Elisha deserted the oxen that he was ploughing with. He ran after Elijah and said, just let me kiss my mum and dad and say goodbye, then I'll follow you. Go ahead, said Elijah, mind you, but don't forget what I've just done to you. Then Elisha left. He took his yoke of oxen that he'd been ploughing with for his family, for his life, for his future, and he butchered them. He made a fire with the plough and tackle, and then boiled the meat and gave a farewell meal for his family. Then he left and followed Elijah, becoming his right-hand man. That's what it meant to be a disciple in the olden days. So when Jesus said this thing, there's a sense in which they would have had this understanding, okay, to be a disciple means you kind of not only just leave your old life behind, you kind of cut off all your options, you burn your bridges, you burn the, get rid of the stuff that you used to do. There's no returning. It's over. And so they would have understood that to follow Jesus meant something like that. A few months ago we sat at a dinner table at home, and there was somebody who was with us who had become a Christian in another country, a regime that was very anti-Christian. And within a few days, her fiance said to her, you've got to leave. Because to be a woman, some of you know her story, a woman in that country was one thing, but to convert to Christianity was a major thing. And basically, women just disappear and are never seen again in those circumstances. And so within a couple of days, she had left on the cover of night. She didn't even have a passport, and she was now in England and living, apart from her family, her brother with all his children and her nephews and nieces, her mum and dad, her fiance, her future, her studies, her work, everything had just gone when she decided to follow Jesus. But it's really weird talking to her, is that although there's a sadness there, and it wasn't a detached sort of thing, there was no sense, and I don't think I ever once felt from her this sense of, I wish I'd not done it, or gosh, I didn't know it would be this hard. Not once. There was just this sense of matter of fact, this is what it is. For me, when I made that decision, I knew I was giving up everything. And here I am, with nothing, and incredibly hard circumstances. But somehow it was okay. It was just like what you were saying. And so often our worship time sort of just goes on this little rambling journey, and you have no idea where it's going to go, and then suddenly it just all comes into this sort of preparation for thinking about these things. Tim Keller said this, you're not living, Tim Keller, amazing, the late great Tim Keller, amazing preacher of pastor in Times Square Church, incredible theologian, said this: you're not living the Christian life unless you put to death the idea that you have the right to live as you choose. I can't believe I'm saying this in the middle of America, he said. I can't believe I'm actually pointing out to you there's probably never been a culture in the history of the world more averse to the very essence of what it means to live a Christian life. Do you hear that? He said. Wow. It's quite a summary of the moment that we're at, isn't it? Because our culture says that the highest value of all is self-determination. And we agree. We can't stand seeing oppressed countries and places where people are stripped of their fundamental human rights. We want fundamental human rights. We agree with them. And yet, so it's a really big deal in our culture. But there is this kind of, greater than that in our culture is this absolute core idea that I have the right, fundamentally, to choose how I live. And Tim Keller says that bumps up against the call of Christ. And there are going to be times when there's going to be some friction there. So, day in the life of Jesus and his disciples. Forget all that for the moment, or park it. Day in the life of Jesus and disciples. Some men come to Jesus on this particular day and say, your cousin, John the Baptist, has been murdered by Herod. Now, we don't really, it's pretty obvious that Jesus and John, they circle around each other. We don't know much about their relationship. But at this point, Jesus said to the disciples, let's go to a desert, desolate place. Let's just get away and get some rest. It's a very, very rare thing that Jesus says. Let's just withdraw. And it seems obvious that he was, John was his beloved cousin, and he would have been devastated. All of his humanity would have been devastated. So your cousin's just been murdered, and he says to the disciples, let's go to a desolate place and get some rest. And it says in the passage in Mark that it says, many were coming and going and they had no leisure even to eat. So that's the sort of situation, is there's all this ministry happening, following Jesus, amazing miracles, things that would have blown their minds. In the middle of it, this awful news comes, and it's so busy, they have no leisure even to eat. Just like you were saying, Kim, that when, serving people sometimes can feel like that, no leisure to even eat. Such a human situation. And so off they go for a little rest, and 5,000 people follow them, including more because there's women and children. So probably about 8, 10, maybe 10,000 people came. I mean, it's a little bit mind-blowing. I was looking at pictures of 10,000 people, and it's a lot. So what do you do when it's overwhelmed? The demands are overwhelming, and you are at the end of yourself. And you have every right to say enough is enough. And there is a place for wisdom, just like you were saying, where you have to kind of work out things. What do you do? And Jesus says, so the disciples say, let's send all these people away. It's time for food. Send them away to the surrounding villages. What a good idea. What a sensible, good idea. And you know the end of the story. You know that Jesus says, no, I want you to give them something to eat. And then follows the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, which we're familiar with. I assume everyone knows that story, but Jesus sits everyone down. They have a little packed lunch, 5 loaves, 2 fishes the little boy has. Jesus says grace and then gives it to the disciples, and they distribute it. And it says they all ate and were satisfied. The disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. And the number of men who had eaten that day were 5,000, because the men are the most important. And so that is, day in the life of Jesus. We need some rest. The worst news possibly he'd ever had, maybe, don't know. But a terrible bit of news, totally right to go and retreat. And then this happens, and the sensible option is to disperse everyone. But
enjoy
this,
the picnic themselves.
yeah.
I mean, really sacrifice, isn't it?
Exactly. So, but how do you get from the place where you're kind of stuck with your own resources and you come to the end of yourself and you do not know what to do, into the abundance of the kingdom? How do you get over the gap? That's really my question, because I think we all know that Jesus offered abundant life, and he offered peace, he offered freedom. When we pray, and the little journey that we've just been on in worship, where it's gone from this place of worship to recognizing there's going to be times of sacrifice, but Jesus is worth worshipping, because we feel and know and sense that the life is in him and not in us. How do we get from us to that? And that is really the sort of fundamental question of this. How do you know how to live a deeply resourced life? Do you want to know? I do. And I think that the next bit, we're going to read this teaching, and it's such a hard one. Why would I choose this one to, because I had to, because I'm preaching on it as part of the sermon series at Woody's. But anyway, you would choose a different one, like, come to me all you who are weary and heavy laden, I'll give you rest. That's how Jesus gives us those resources. Or, I've come to give life in all its fullness, abundant life. The thief comes to steal, kill and destroy, but not me. That's a good one to do, Or even offer your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. That's your spiritual act of worship. Then, you will know what God's will is, his good, pleasing, perfect will. That's the end of that little Romans thing. That would be a good one to do. That if you offer your body, you'll get, But not this. Let's read it. Large crowds were travelling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Keep them going. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? Or if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone will see and ridicule you and say, this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't you first sit down and consider whether he's able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? If he's not able, he'll send a delegation, while the other is a long way off, and ask for terms of peace. In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything you have cannot be my disciples. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor the manure pile. It is thrown out. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. What a comforting word. Basically, the commentaries say this is the highest and hardest explanation of what it is to be a disciple of Jesus. It is the absolutely going for the jugular. And I wonder what you think of what you heard him say. I mean, honestly, give me some feedback in the room. Go back to the first bit of that reading. What do you think of this? If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, you cannot be my disciple. What do you think?
I think hate sounds quite an extreme.
It does.
Well, and I'm just wondering what the actual translation.
It does mean hate.
Does it actually
Yeah.
mean hate? Oh, okay.
Unfortunately.
We want to get away from that bit, I think.
We do. All preachers want to avoid this. Yeah.
Especially the family bit.
Yes. Especially when you're sitting there with a baby in your arms. It's unbearable.
You can hit like someone you don't really like if you
Yeah.
if we have to.
Mm.
We can hit Putin, that's fine.
Yeah.
But like, why do you have to?
Yeah.
And
Well,
is it
why?
called that?
Why
Yeah.
indeed? I mean, it is a very difficult thing to hear, and actually, I think it's a bit dangerous in our world to. We live in a world where there's lots of religious fundamentalism where this would be justified in some circles and some religions perhaps, and even in some sort of twisted versions of Christianity. It's sort of, it feels like a world where hate is on the agenda. And I felt really reluctant to even preach on it, and the word hate, and there's some explanations for it, but I just want to park the hate bit for a minute and just start with the large crowds travelling with Jesus. Crowns, towers and wars. What is Jesus on about, first of all? So people are attracted to Jesus because around him there's life. He heals people. We're desperate for healing. When we worship and it's a bit painful, it's because we're desperate for healing. Inner healing. We're desperate for peace. We're just as desperate as human beings have been throughout all time. And so when the crowds were circling around Jesus, they were desperate just like you and me, for relief from our anxiety or our fear or our physical pain. And they were drawn to him. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man. Light-hearted, humorous. The children loved him. When children love someone, they're generally okay, aren't they? They're appealing people. He was probably funny. You can't quite work out what his jokes were, but he probably was, because the best people any of us ever know are funny, aren't they? We love funny. And so, of course, Jesus must have been funny in some way. And so the crowds were around him, and there's always crowds around Jesus. And Jesus, I think, loved them. He welcomed them. So when they came and the 5,000 people were there, he was all right with it. I don't really like crowds that much. And I am that person who will say, well, it's not quite the right time. Maybe they could go away and come back another time. Or, let's agree a date to meet up in the far distant future. Or this isn't quite the right time to have my home invaded, or whatever it is. I am that person. And Greg's less like that, and so we have this slight push and pull in our family life of when it's okay to be invaded, But so I understand that it's hard, but these crowds, they wanted to invade because they're hungry and desperate, just like we are. And Jesus just does this thing. He just starts talking about the tower, and move on to the next slide. The tower, and he sort of says, you crowds, I love you. I want you to come. I'm drawing you to follow me. You personally, I want you to follow me. But before you do that, weigh it up. Because it's not casual. I'm not inviting you into an open relationship where you can have a load of other lovers as well. This isn't a casual invitation. It is a moment to weigh up what you are about, what you want in your life, whether you want to live the way that you have been living, or whether you want something else. And so he says, don't do it too quickly. Don't be too quick to say, I give my life to Jesus, I'll follow you, I'll do. Actually take a pause. Because if you're going to build a tower and you ran out of money halfway, you just look stupid. Or if you're going to war and you ran out, you didn't, you've got to weigh these things up. Because we live with a tension, I think, and this is like what Jesus is poking, is we want comfort and ease and power, and we want safety and control. We're desperate for control. All of us are at the heart. We want to control all the things around us. There's a real human root in us of desire for control. But we also want adventure, unpredictability. We want to feel special, significant, something amazing's happened through our life. We want all of those things. Those tensions are very real human tensions, and we erratically swing from one to the other in our lives, don't we? I want a life of purpose. I'll give up everything. Oh, I want safety. I'm feeling too anxious today. It's just toing and froing. And so he's inviting them, take a pause. It's not a mistake that he uses the illustration of towers and wars, money and power, because they are the darkest roots in human nature in a way, the desire for money and power. And they have, so of course, they are the things that have these deep holds over us. And Jesus says, following me is going to affect your relationship with money and power and those sorts of things. So it's a take a pause moment. And then he goes on to the uncomfortable description of what it is to become and be a disciple. And he says this thing, if you to the crowd, he ups the ante even more. Unless you can carry your cross, you can't do it. Unless you hate, I'm going to say it because I am going to explain it, but unless you hate your family, then you can't do it. What is he actually saying? I mean, it is known that, that's the guy from the on the road. Basically, in the ancient world, to say that sort of thing, they would have had a different reference point to us. So the first thing they would have thought was, he didn't mean hate, he meant love less. So it's kind of like an ancient idiom for saying, I love you and I hate you, is merely saying, I love you more. And it's kind of like saying the starkness of this relationship and the reality of it is that I've only got room really for you at the top. I've only got room for one. It's like a pyramid of loves. There's room for other loves, but there's only room for one at the top. And Jesus is really saying that. And I think it does need saying. I'm not sure that any word other than hate would have made us pay any attention to it. We'd have been like, yeah, Jesus, we've got to love him most. Do you? Where is it in the pyramid? What are the things that you love and long for? Who are you most protective of? That little baby, that gorgeous, perfect looking baby, has drawn out of you love you didn't even know you had. And a willingness to sacrifice and stay in this place of just, she is the most important thing in the world now. You have become nothing compared to her. Even when she's got a dirty nappy or she's wriggling around, whatever it is, because it has reordered your life, that love has. And Jesus is saying, your whole love order has got to be reordered. You've got to love me first, because you will not survive the discipleship journey. You won't. You will come to a cropper. You'll come up against an enemy too big for you, or against something that will just make you show this sort of frivolity and the shallowness of your relationship. Unless you love me first, there will not be the resources that you need. We know that Jesus honoured the law, and the law said, love your father and mother and honour them, so that your life will go well for you. And he said, I haven't come to get rid of the law, I've come to fulfill it. So we know that, and we know he's saying, greater love has no man or woman than that they would lay down their life for somebody else. That's Jesus' teaching. And you cannot zoom in on one sentence and say, if Jesus says that, I'm rejecting him. You have to put it in the context of all of the things he is saying. And say, okay, what's he really getting at here? And he's saying, unless I become the supreme, unmatched centre of your life, you won't be able to survive in your journey of discipleship. That's really what it's saying. And it's all in the shadow of the cross. Everything that Jesus ever says is in the shadow of the reality that he's heading right now, as he says it, towards his own execution at the hands of the Romans, but also his death on behalf of you, So he doesn't ask us to do anything that he isn't already outweighed by his love for us. The cross is, like we were just saying in the worship, the cross is the thank you for the cross, Lord. Thank you for the price you paid. Those amazing words. Worthy is the Lamb that was slain. He is worth it. And what he's saying to you is that you, to me, are worth dying for. That is something to take away. And when you're in the middle of your kind of the life where you're trying to save yourself, remember that Jesus didn't try and save himself. It says in Hebrews, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. You are the joy set before Jesus. He endured the cross. He says in the Bible, he set his face like flint. It says that in Isaiah. Flint. Why? Because it was incredibly hard to do. But he's heading towards the cross. because you are worth it. You are the prize. Isn't it amazing how we were talking about all of that?
Yeah.
And I've got it written down here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when the call of Jesus seems to say something so restrictive and hard, you have to keep in mind that everything that Jesus ever taught was about freedom. Everything he taught was about us becoming liberated to be our true selves and to be able to love God in freedom. That's what his teaching is about. So everything he says, even this restriction, give up everything, put me at the centre, is so that you can be free. And we are not free because we spend a lot of time in our life grasping and grabbing and clinging onto the things that we feel make us feel safe and strong and, free. And Jesus is saying, question that. Your practices, your needs, the way that you survive, question them. Put me at the centre and then see what happens. Jesus said, whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. And it can really feel a bit like a death, some of these things. I think we have this thing, if in doubt, surrender. It's like a little saying that we just ended up realising that the surrender is at the heart, the secret. It's the potent secret at the core of Christianity. It's not surrender to nothing, it's surrender to Jesus. And so if you're in a time and a place, and some of you definitely are, where the pressure is on you and you feel like, I can't do this, I need to get over into the freedom bit, sometimes the doorway is surrender. And it's even saying, this is how it is, and I cannot change it. I surrender. My friend who used to sit next to in chemistry used to say, if in doubt, it turns blue. It's always the answer in every chemistry test. If in doubt, surrender is a sort of core principle of discipleship. And I think that's what Jesus is really saying here. He's saying, surrender to this reality that you need me at the core of your life. And then just to quickly go back to the feeding of the 5,000, this tagline that Jesus says about the saltiness and, unless you stay salty, there's no point in, your salt must be thrown away. The next bit. It's just fit for the manure pile. Seems again so harsh. Salt was in the ancient world like a kind of money. It was so important. It was used for preserving, disinfecting, healing, flavouring, everything. It was one of the most important commodities in the ancient world. In fact, Roman soldiers were given an allowance of salt every month called a salarium, from the Latin for salt, which is where we get our word salary from. So it was totally crucial to life, salt. And so when Jesus said this, if it loses its saltiness, they would have gone, yes, exactly. Salt is so important. And he's saying, all of his sentences, they're not like one-liners that you take on their own. They're in the context of what he's been saying. So what he's saying is, if you want to stay salty, if you want to have this commodity at the core of your life, this precious commodity, salt, and it's got to be salty salt, then the things that I've been saying, that's how you have it. Me at the centre, and freedom comes because of it. And actually, what you see in that feeding of the 5,000 is so interesting, isn't it? Because they literally have come to the end of themselves. And they are trying to escape the pressure of the moment. Familiar feeling? Ever feel like that? Where you think, a way out would be this way, or that way, or take this, or run there, or control everything. And the pressure of that moment is really profound because there's 5,000 people watching. And Jesus shows them resources that are out of sight but present to them. and they cannot get those resources unless they go with it, and they actually agree. Let's just go with this stupid packed lunch idea. This stupid little fish. Who cares about this fish? Look at them. They're not going to do anything. Look at the embarrassing amount of crowd around me. And look at this silly little moment. And Jesus saying grace over them. Nothing has happened until this moment. You know, he's saying grace. Get them to sit down in groups. It's all highly organised.
Same as
Groups
the
of people.
water jugs, isn't it? The water jugs at Cana, going with it, you know?
Yeah, go and do it.
Yeah.
Nothing obvious is going to happen. And that little moment of stepping over is about surrender. All right then, I'll go with it. All right then, I'll lay down my agenda. God, I've come to the end of my resources. I'm actually too tired. What you were saying, Kim, we come to that place all the time, and I'm not advocating for burnout. Just saying, there's a moment when you come to the end of your resources and you've got to say to God, okay, is there something I cannot see but is available for me? I think when we moved into community, I felt like God said that to me. He said, I didn't want to. When the moment came, I didn't want to. We've been talking about it for 10 years, and then the moment came, I didn't want to. And I was really upset, and I was clinging on to our old life where I had control of everything, or relatively. And then I felt God say, you don't have to do it. But if you do, you'll see something you can't see yet. I mean, that's what this is about. It's like this sort of moment of surrender. You know, think of the things where you feel like, this is an impossible thing for me. I've come to the end of where I'm at, and I am overwhelmed right now. And my thought really is to say, go away, spend time with God and say, tell him how it is, tell him how impossible it is, tell him that you long for something else and that you cannot get yourself to that place, and then say, I surrender to your will and your ways, and I am going to trust that you will show me something. I surrender. And you know what actually Jesus did when he fed the 5,000, he multiplied the food in some way, but he gave it to them to give out. I just think that's such a great thing to have done, to actually say, this is what it's like to partner with me, go and give the food out. It must have been amazing, so exciting, and then eating it afterwards, and them almost getting the praise, and you're part of his team, what, for giving us this miraculous food. You know, Jesus is really wanting to put us into a place of abundant provision, and we can't do it until he comes right to the centre. And I think in the Christian life, we go around this over and over again. We come to this place so many times, and it's right to come all the way back round and say, I've run out again. Teach me the next stage of my story, the story of walking with you and walking in abundant life. Show me what it's like on the other side of it, and teach me, take me through the little transition of surrender. I'm following you, Jesus, to the cross, and Jesus says this is what it is like to take up your cross. It is to surrender and to walk with him into whatever he leads you into, and who knows what that will be. But I'm just going to end by praying, and I'm just aware that in the room there's challenges that people are facing that we talked about a little bit in our sort of worship time, but God is present with 12 baskets full of food for you. I feel sure of it, and I just want to pray for us that we access that amazing heavenly abundance. So God, we just come to you. The reality is that we reach the end of our resources regularly, and we know we cannot solve every single problem. We cannot remake ourselves. We cannot fix ourselves, and we cannot fix the world. but we're following you, Jesus. We have said that you're worth it. Beautiful Jesus, healer, peace bringer, life giver, provider, mental health sorter outer, difficult problems that we cannot solve. You, Jesus, you see the other side, you see the 12 basketfuls of food, because for you see into the abundance of the kingdom. And so we just stand before you, recognizing that we can't do anything to save our own lives. We can only lay them down and surrender to you. And that's what we do in this moment again. We surrender. And we say, you be God. Put you ahead of everything. Put you at the center, above everything, knowing that you will make me better at loving my family anyway. I choose you above all other things. I pray, Jesus, for provision. I pray this week for provision that will come in abundance, peace in abundance. Food for our weary souls. Come, Lord Jesus. We pray, pour out your Spirit today. In your name. Amen.
Amen.